A very good morning, friends. My name is Dhananjay Reddy, and today we are going to discuss one more concept on identity politics, that is the role of religion in Indian politics. And this is one of the most important thing, not only from the view of UPSC, PSIR, but also in order to understand our knowledge or in order to build up our knowledge for other papers, such as GS paper 2, internal security of GS paper 3, and also here and there for essay writing also. So as far as this topic is considered, uh, this is one topic that we have to discuss or we have to analyze right from the basics. We should know why religion is playing a crucial role in Indian politics. To understand that, we have to understand how far Indian religion is associated with the public policy right from the ancient times, also in the medieval times, and how it was associated in the modern times. So this is what the thing is. And on the first slide, whatever it is, the role of religion in Indian politics, one thing is very sure, that whenever you are going and mixing two things together, that is religion and politics, then it is going to be a recipe for disaster. Disaster is inevitable if we are mixing religion and politics. And in a country like India, where there are almost every religion of the world, then it is very, very, very vital to ensure that religion and politics are not getting into one's domain, into each other's domain very frequently, or into one's other domain very often. So, role of religion in Indian politics, we study from these perspectives. That is how religion and politics can be separated. What is the principles of secularism? So, secularism is one topic which is also related to role of religion in Indian politics, and that point I will be discussing when I was dealing the concept of secularism of India in salient features of Indian Constitution. But for now, I'll be restricting this discussion to how far Indian politics were associated with religion right from the ancient times, then the medieval times, and then in the modern days. On the first slide, you are going to see these are the riots that has happened in independent India over a period of time. I have taken these things only after independence. The first slide, that is the first photo, if you look, this is the riots that were happening against the Sikhs after the massacre or after the assassination of Srimati Indira Gandhi. Uh, Srimati Indira Gandhi. So this was the anti-Sikh riots which was happening in the outer parts of the Delhi. And the second one is the Rail Yatra or the Rath Yatra that was conducted by Mr. Advani for building the Ram temple at the so-called Babri Masjid in Ayodhya. So this was the second incident, and this incident or this call has resulted in the demolition of the Babri Masjid in the early 1990s. As a result, there has been severe clashes in Mumbai, in Godhra, in Gujarat, followed by the communal clashes that India has ever seen after independence. So this was the incident which was in Gujarat. That was the Godhra incident, where people started putting a blaze on the trains. So this is one phenomena that we are going to see, and this type of clashes in India, they are very, very old in Indian perspective. If you look at the recent Delhi CAA clash, then that is also an important thing that we have to understand from the perspective of role of religion in Indian politics. So right from the verdict of Shabarimala case to that of triple talaq to that of the communal clashes that are happening in the country, in various parts of the country, these are related in some way or the other to the policy, public policy making, or to the some way or the other the political parties involving religion for their personal benefits, or to the advantages of their political parties. So this is one thing that we have to understand in detail, so that we can write favorably a good answer in all the topics that I have said so far. Not only that, we should also be well aware while forming our electoral behavior by understanding this thing. So, in this discussion, what I am going to discuss is I am going to discuss some basics about religion, how far Indian religion has evolved over a period of time, and how Indian religion got associated with politics right from the ancient times. And we will also see how religion over a period of time has evolved in India. Causes for the role of religion in Indian politics. We will be discussing the views of scholars. This is not going to be my view or your view. This is the views of scholars of international in Indian politics on the causes of role of religion in Indian politics. Then I will be discussing with how politics as such were evolved over a period of time with religion. So communal politics in India, how they have evolved over a period of time. And this communal politics at times has given rise to communal rights in the country. We will be looking at those riots in the country. Next, what is the role of religion in Indian politics? We will see whether religion always played a crucial role in Indian politics, but we have to understand how far that role has been strengthened the democracy, how far it has weakened the democracy in the similar way that we discussed for caste the other day. So recent trends of role of religion. We will also have a basic analysis from 2014, particularly how role of religion is playing in Indian politics, whether people are voting based on their religion or whether people are voting based on their caste, or they have they given focus on the developmental politics. Because India has come a long way, almost 75 years of its independence. We have to analyze how far Indian voters are behaving while exercising their universal adult franchise. So this is going to be the point of discussion today. I will be starting with the basics. First thing first, let us enter into the basics. So the role of religion in Indian politics is a form of ascriptive policies that are ascribed to your birth, policies that are ascribed to your status of your religion. So politics of role of religion in politics is a form of ascriptive politics, similar to our caste politics, similar to our ethnic politics. This is also related to our ascriptive policies, where people belonging to a particular religion tend to form alliances and political alliances to gain some common objectives. So this is the use of religion for your personal political benefits. That is, you form alliances, you form political alliances, social alliances in the name of religion, so that you have to meet your common objectives. That objectives may be either to form the government or either to be a formidable opposition. Whatever it is, you have, or these organizations has certain objectives in common. So the use of religion for political purposes is called communalism. Let us understand very clearly the Gandhiji's words. Gandhi clearly said that religion is vital for the growth of the human being, because religion is one good thing which sets the moral prudence in human beings. But if you are going to use religion for the advantage of political gains, then that is highly unacceptable, and that is called communalism. And this communalism is going to give rise to communal riots over a period of time. So communalism meaning is use of religion for political purposes is called communalism. According to Bipin Chandra, communalism is an assertion that secular interest of a person are coextensive with religious identity. So, Bipin Chandra, the historian, he has clearly said that people used to think that, okay, we have our secular interest along with our religious identity. So, communalism is nothing but it is an assertion of secular interest of a person are coextensive with their religious identities. And according to Ashgar Ali, engineer, that we discussed the other day, he has a very positive role, or he has a very good view on the role of identity politics in India. According to Ashgar Ali Engineer, communalism is essentially a political and socio-economic phenomena and not just a religious phenomena. He says that politically people are getting mobilized, socially and economically people are getting mobilized for religious purposes, and this is not just a religious phenomena. In order to gain some political interest, in order to gain some social interest, in order to gain some economic interest, people are themselves organizing on communal lines or organizing on the basis of religion. So this was Ashgar Ali's comments. If you look at the historical evolution of Indian secularism, this is very simple to understand. The ancient and the great Sanatana Dharma of India propagated the philosophy of respect of every sect and spiritual tradition right from ancient times. That is, we have this called Sanatana Dharma, the great Indian Dharma, which treats every religion the aspect of tolerance, which imbibes the values of harmonious living in the people. So this Sanatana Dharma, right from our ancient times, has preached the practice of having respect of other religions and respect of spiritual traditions also. So this is the basic foundations for Indian religion. And in the history, it is very clear that there are many kings who has promoted secular way of Indian life. For example, Ashoka the Great was the first ruler to extensively support the philosophy of secularism during his empire. Ashoka, he was a converted Buddhist, but he treated every religions with equal respect. And then if you see later on, Jainism and Buddhism, Islam, Christianity evolved in the country and the same land where Hindu flourished. The flourishment of all these other religions clearly shows that we are quite a tolerant nation. We are quite an acceptable society to the other religions also. The moment you are accepting, then there will be always a harmony and there will be a growth of other religions. India being a vital democracy, India being a member of all the six religions itself shows that we are very tolerant society right from our ancient times. And particularly similar to Bhakti and Jainist movements, you see it is similar to Buddhist and Jainism of ancient India. We also had these Bhakti and Sufi movements during our medieval India, and they have reinforced the idea of oneness of God. And they have said that all religions are equal. So Sufism and Bhakti movement have also played a very crucial role in ensuring secular nature of Indian society over a period of time. And similar to Akbar, similar to Ashoka, there is one more great Muslim ruler called the Akbar, who was very secular in his outlook. He has propagated the idea of Sulaykul, that is peace among the religions. All religions are one and peace among the religions. So this was a religious doctrine of Akbar, treating all the religions equally. So historically also, even before the arrival of the British or India, more or less India was broadly a secular country, which means the ethos of the country are based on secularism, they are based on existential harmony, they are based on mutual respect and love towards your brethren. So this is how Indian secularism has been associated with over a period of time. After independence, constitution also granted some religious freedoms. However, we have to understand that constitution has clearly laid down the preamble. In the preamble, we have this term called secular. It was added in the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976, but still India is a secular country right from the ancient times that we have seen so far. So Constitution itself clearly defines India as a secular state. Apart from that, the freedom of religion right from Article 25, 26, 27, 28, they grant the individual the right to freedom of religion. So Indians do exercise their religious freedom, but this religious freedom is not always absolute. It has been subjected to two principles, that is called public order, health and morality. Whenever your religious feelings are obstructing the public health, morality or the health of the individual, definitely you are going to, or the state is going to intervene, and then it is going to regulate, which means that in India there is no strict separation of powers between the religion and politics, but we have some overlapping doctrine of secularism. As far as Article 14 is considered, it gives primacy of equality before law, equal protection of laws, and Article 15 it gives primacy to the it gives primacy to the individual, saying that there should not be any discrimination based on the religion. So Article 14 and 15, Article 21, 22, all these articles are giving primacy to the individual, though there are articles like 25, 26, 27, 28 which are giving primacy to that of the religion. So along with religion, we also have individual rights. Constitution of India bases its doctrine on individual rather than on religion. Though religion has been given its own domain of operation, it is not an absolute domain of operation. But along with this, we also see that Representation of People's Act under Section 123(3) of Representations of People's Act clearly restricts a candidate who is participating in elections not to abuse or use the religion of the other candidate for his electoral benefits. If the candidates are using the name of the other opponent candidate for his personal gains, then definitely in his public rallies, then that will be considered as a corrupt practice and he will be disqualified from contesting the elections. So these are the things where we do clearly have an analysis saying that, okay, India has somewhere an overlapping doctrine of secularism, unlike the Western concept of strict separation of secularism, that is, strict separation of religion from politics. If you look at the 2011 census data, then it clearly shows that how far the diversity of the country is. In census 2011, it is very clearly noted that all religions in India, or the major religions are Hinduism, which constitutes around 80% of the Indian population, followed by immediately the Muslims with 14%, Christians with 2.3%, Sikhs 1.72%, Buddhist 0.70, Jains 0.37, other religions like Parsis around 0.66%. So this shows that how far in what states they are majority and in what states they are minority. So India has different religions, and probably India is the only country where all the six religions of the world are in coexistence at a similar point of time. This is one thing that we have to understand while studying role of religion in Indian politics. We have to understand the diversity of the country. We have to understand the accommodative nature of the country in order to understand how far religion is playing its role in Indian politics. So this is what the religious census is, or this is how people are based on their religions in India. 80% are Hindus, so we call Hindu majority country. However, we have equal number of minorities, or we have a prominent role of minorities with Muslims at the Muslims as the leading minority in the country with around 15% of their population, followed by Christians, followed by Sikhs, Buddhists, Jains, and other religions. So this is what the religious basis of the country is, that we have to understand. So you have to remember all these diversities in order to understand, or in order to appreciate the role of religion in Indian politics very clearly. Now, we have discussed what is secularism in Indian context. We have discussed how far the society is diverse. And we have to also understand how religion has become a part of Indian politics over a period of time. That is what we have to understand. And in order to understand that, there were four theories which was propounded by the scholars of political thinking and international relations. So the fourth theories which says that religion in India has become a prominent role in Indian politics is: the first argument is of essentialist, the second one is of instrumentalist, the third one is of institutionalist, fourth one is of social constructivist argument. So what do we mean by this? Essentials. So essentialists, they argue that the Western scholars, essential argument was propounded by Western scholars like Louis Dumont. I said about this person, he is very, very antagonist to the Indian tone of secularism or Indian tone of casteism. So Louis Dumont, he clearly said that he misunderstood that Hindus and Muslims are antagonist communities by very nature. As a result, conflict is very vital or natural among these two religions. So he said that as there are antagonistic classes or antagonistic religious entities inside the country, then it is natural or it is essential that they go and form associations based on political lines for gaining the political position. So this is what the concept of essentialist is. So he has given example of the two-state theory propounded by Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Syed Ahmad Khan Savarkar's Hinduism or Hindutva policy. So they said, by using these three examples of Syed Ahmad Khan or Savarkar and Muhammad Ali Jinnah, he clearly said that the two antagonistic communities or two antagonistic religions exist in India. As a result, they go for joining the Indian politics. So it is essential and it is very natural. So essentialists argue that it is very essential by the very nature of the Indian society. There are instrumentalist argument. Instrumental means out of some instrumental benefits that people are going to have Indian political associations, that is, they are going to associate it with Indian politics. For example, Bipin Chandra says preference of elites go for mobilization on the basis of ethnic identities, because the elites go for instrumental benefits like the benefits that are going to get by associating themselves with the political parties. As a result, they tend to go for ethnic identities or capturing the ethnic identities. That may be religion, that may be language, that may be religion, that may be of your race, anything. So elites, just for to capture power for their instrumental benefits, they are going to have associations with these ethnic identities. So that was the example of Bipin Chandra. Then one next comes institutional arguments. Institutional arguments means when public policies are themselves based on identity politics, then definitely community politics are going to arise. This I discussed in my last class also. Say for example, Constitution of India itself gives affirmative actions based on caste, based on religion. So Indian Constitution clearly recognizes minorities as of two types. One is the linguistic minorities and the other one is religious minorities. So the moment government is making a policy based for these minorities, definitely then it is based on ethnic identities and it is going to give rise to communal violence. So this is the concept of Ashkar Ali, engineer. I also discussed about this man, right, in my previous class, and today also I discussed about this great personality. As far as social constructivist theory is concerned, they say that it is in the deep minds of the people that they are conscious about their religious identity and they are socially constructing themselves on these religious identities when they are living in a society. So this was the concept given by Mamdani, and he said that communities carry these mental maps or stereotypes about each other, considering whether whenever a Muslim sees a Hindu or a Hindu sees a Muslim, then they carry these type of stereotype images. And in the absence of regular communication, if they are not going to communicate among themselves, then they are going to form their own social construction arguments, saying that okay, I have to form my association based on my people who I have a common interest similar to me. But this is the absence of regular communication which makes people to have this stereotype images. As a result, people are going to form social constructivist arguments and going to base their associations based on the religious politics. And this provides the base for elite class also, because elite class, the moment these people have social constructivists form social groups, then definitely elites come and they use them for their instrumental benefits. So these are the four arguments which clearly says that why in India the role of religion in Indian politics clearly exists. So this is a theoretical exposition of how religion is playing a crucial role in Indian politics, or why religion at all is playing a crucial role in Indian politics. So there are four theories. Let us remember these four theories: essentialist argument, the instrumental arguments, the institutional arguments, as well as finally the social constructivist argument. Moving on, based on these arguments, there are few scholars who said their view. For example, Neeraj Chandok, in his article, Indian Model of Secularism itself has allowed space for legitimization of communalism. What do I mean by this? Indian model of secularism is a very peculiar model and it is very different from the Western model, because Western model clearly separates religion from politics. But Indian model of secularism is not strict separation of religion and politics, but it is somewhere religion intervening with the politics and politics intervening with the religion. As a result of this policy of Indian model of secularism, we do have the role of communalism, because the moment there is political intervention in religion and religion intervention in politics, definitely there rises the concept of communalism in Indian politics, communalism in Indian politics. So Indian politics are themselves getting reflected by religion and politics are getting themselves reflected on religion. As a result, this is very legitimization. This gives legitimacy to communalism. So this was the concept of Neeraj Chandok. BJP has been successful in establishing Congress model as pseudo-secular. Whenever you see the BJP rhetoric against Congress, then BJP leaders or BJP political members, they come and they say that okay, Congress is a pseudo-secular, pseudo-liberal. These are the terms which will be used by BJP members. So they were quite successful in proving the point that Congress is pseudo-secular, Congress is pseudo-liberal, and they have their own communal agenda as the genuinely secular people, because they consider that BJP is the only one who represents their communal identity in a general way. As a result, they go for analyzing or legitimizing this communalism. There is also the view of British state, that is, politics in India has always been communal. So this is what the British say. In India, if you look, Indian politics right from its initiation or initial days, it was very very communal. But this was not accepted by Indian scholars, particularly the scholars of Bipin Chandra, liberal scholars, who said that in India, as we have seen, India is more or less a secular country, and communal politics were very very new to the country. It has been emerged only after the arrival of British at the Indian political scenario. So British Indians clearly reject the view of British that Indians politics are communal right from the beginning. Though there are sectorial violence here and there in across some space and time periods of Indian history, but communal classes as a phenomena is just started with the British state. It is through the British policies of divide and rule that communalism has entered into Indian politics. So it was the under the British rule for their British political gains, they have divided and ruled the country based on communal lines. So this was a phenomena. As a phenomena, communalism has been propagated by the British as per Indian scholars. So what I said, how far why there is causes for causes for role of religion in Indian politics, in which I discussed that yes, um, four theoretical arguments and the analysis that has been given by various scholars. Moving on, Bipin Chandra has also had his views. Bipin Chandra, in his book India After Independence, he clearly says that how communism has developed over a period of time in India. In he has given three approaches, or he said that communism in India has evolved under three stages. It was the early 19th century where people belonged between 1800 and 1900. People organized themselves based on certain beliefs that okay, we have some religious as well as political, economic, and social interest. So we have to organize ourselves into certain groups. So this was a group formation stage where people had an idea of like we had some common religious ideologies or common political, social, economic interest. So people started thinking about their interest only in the 19th century on the basis of these lines. By the beginning of the 20th century, communalism made a proper appearance, which means these people they thought okay, this has been reinforced by the 20th century, by the early of the 20th century. So communalism made a proper appearance. Communities realized that their interests are different from each other. So we have to secure our interest. So people first started themselves forming into communities. People started forming into communities. As a result of this, they started thinking that okay, we have our common interest. Now they started securing their own interests by the beginning of the 20th century. But with the arrival of the British and British divide and rule policies, this has turned out to be an antagonistic principle, as a result, giving rise to two nation theory of India and Pakistan. So this is the concept which was risen by the uh, which was risen by the so-called English only after 1905, that is after division of Bengal based on divide and rule policy. So Bipin Chandra also clearly says that if you look at Indian nature of society, communal politics is not uh, an eternal phenomena in India. It was only a phenomena which has risen after the arrival of British into Indian political scenario. He clearly says that until 19th century, people are always, or people doesn't know about their religion, doesn't know about their socio-economic benefits. They were just organized in a secular fashion. It was only in the beginning of the 19th century, from the beginning of 19th century, people started realizing that they had some common interest. they have certain common identities based on religion, based on socio-economic, political interest, and then they started organizing. But this organization has become more prominent only after the beginning of the 20th century. And with the arrival of the British into Indian political scenario, this groups has developed the antagonistic tendencies because it was viewed, or it was the intention of the British policy makers to use these internal fault lines and create the antagonism between one caste to one caste, one religion to one religion, one community to one community. So Bipin Chandra also carries the same view that of that of Rumalia Thapar. Now, if you look at the evolution of communal politics in India, before independence, it was until 1857, more or less, the society was not that communal. Our religion used to play a very less role in Indian politics, even though it has played a positive role. But only after 1857 revolt, that is after the Sipahi mutiny, British understood that okay, if Indians and Muslims are going to get united, then it is very difficult for us to rule. Because 1857 Sipahi mutiny is one bright example where even though the movement was led by the Hindus, they had one objective of reinstating the Mughal emperor. This shows that Hindus and Muslims are more or less a very peaceful community. They shared their values right from ancient time, right from medieval times. But it was after 1857 that British realized that if these two communities or if these two religions are coming together, then it will be very difficult for us to survive. Hence, they started appeasement policies. From 1857 to 1880s, they started appeasing the Hindus, but they were not quite successful in appeasing the Hindus. But from 1880 onwards or 1890 onwards, they started appeasing Muslims, particularly the conservative Muslims, and they started instigating the seeds of hatred. As a result, Muslims got carried away by the British and they started forming their own policies, particularly leaders like Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. We will be studying about this when we are studying about Sir Syed Ahmad Khan in detail in Indian political thinking. But for now, remember that this is appeasement policies of British after 1857 that it has started cleavages in the Indian religion identities. So, with the support of British, Muslim League was formed in the year 1906, and then were in by 1909 Minto Morley reforms. In this Minto Morley reforms, they have given separate electorate for Muslim community. Then in 1915, in order to counter this, Savarkar formed Hindu Mahasabha against the Muslim League. He was very upset with the policies of the Muslim League. As a result, he has formed Hindu Mahasabha. However, in 1919, if you just look at the reforms of or the acts that were made by the British, even the 1919 Act clearly laid or extended separate electorate for other religious communities like Sikhs, Parsis, Anglo-Indians. Now, this clearly shows that it is the deliberative attempt of the British to divide India based on their internal religious lines. So this was then deliberative policy. 1909-1919 Act clearly shows that their acts were very malified. Their acts were very based on act of hatred. Particular apart from this, not only in 1919, after this, in 1932, they have come out with communal award. Now they wanted to alienate Dalits from the Hindu sections. So they started to divide Hindus among themselves in the name of Dalits, Brahmins, Kshatriya, Sudras. So they started dividing Hindu community again by 1932. First, they did communal divide, then they started entering into the religion and they started using the social false signs of religion and they started mobilizing the Dalits. So 1932 communal award is just another policy of the British where they wanted to divide or reduce the power of Congress, and they show that they wanted Dalits to fight against the Indian National Congress. So this is the tactics that British has played. In fact, it is very sad thing that India, which was a very secular country, which was a very tolerant country, has lost its religious tolerance only after the British policy has been incorporated. All such developments before independence has finally culminated into partition, and the worst form of communal violence has taken place in the subcontinent. So if you look the 1947 partition of the country and the communal violences that has followed after this, they were clearly the result of the British. So it is quite an existence. It is quite clear that communalism is a new a phenomena that can be attributed to the malicious designs of the British community. So after independence, let us continue our discussion after independence. Until 1960s, if we see with Jawaharlal Nehru at the helm of affairs, communal politics was subsidized. Because no major communal violences has taken place, yet bitterness of partition remained, but more or less India was a peaceful community from 1940s after 1950s to 1960s. This is because of the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru. Congress was a very in a hegemonic nature, so it didn't. It had all the powers to suppress any other revolution or any other political clashes based on religion. Nehru emphasized secular agenda. He was very tolerant to other religions. As a result, there were no communal clashes during the first decade of independence. Government also banned some communal organizations, particularly organizations like RSS, Hindu Mahasabha, right? And they have banned these organizations. As a result, more or less, they were able to establish that communal politics were subsidized, right? So communal politics in India were subsided after independence for the first 10 years. So this was the subsidence phase of the communal politics in India. However, if you look from 1960s, then this decade is called as decade of dangerous phenomena. So there is one person called Selig Harrison. Harrison calls this decade as dangerous decade. Why dangerous decade? By 1962, we had a war with China in which India was defeated, and in 1965, we have another war with Pakistan. Back to back war to wars, two wars back to back, has made the country to be at the very exploitative uh, nature. So this made the country to get to a very unstable situation. So war with the neighbors has seen in this decade, and there were rise of linguistic movements in the country. So there were demands across the country for separate states based on linguistic reorganization of the states. So this has challenged the internal security also. So from one side we are challenged from outside, and the other side internally also there were internal turmoil in the country, and eruption of communal clashes has taken place in industrial towns like Ranchi, Nagpur, Aligarh, Ahmedabad, and Jabalpur. So in these cities, communal violences has taken place. So this decade is called a very dangerous decade, that is 1960s decade. The decade between 1970s and 1980s, we see increasing role of religion in Indian politics. So slowly, politics started gaining its traction after 1970s. The reason for this is the breakdown of Congress system. Until 1967, Congress used to have this hegemony, but after 1967, slowly Congress system was down. Congress system got disintegrated. In the 1967, that is in the fourth general elections, for the first time in the 8 states, in almost 8 states, Congress lost its power, and different parties established their political domains in 8 states. So this is the first blow to the Congress in 1967 in four general elections. Following this, Congress system got slowly disintegrated by 1990s. So if you look breakdown of Congress system, the moment Congress system was broken down, it gave an opportunity for other members to form association based on their caste for their personal or political gains. So it made the competition very tough, and then political parties had to go for greater use of money and muscle power. The moment Congress system was disintegrated, there were rise of many parties, and they started using muscle power to develop themselves as a political power. So muscle and money power has become more prominent, and the Green Revolution made the rise of OBCs, particularly in some areas. So Punjab became the worst theatre of communal politics during this phase, and that is the reason where Operation Blue Star was conducted by Srimati Indira Gandhi. As a result, she was assassinated. It culminated into the tragedy of Operation Blue Star, followed by the assassination of Indira Gandhi, and this was followed by the six riots in North India. So communal clashes continued from 1960 to 1970 and 1980. Particularly by 1960s, if it was in the initial stages, it reaches a zenith in 1970s and 80s. This was not stopped then; it still continued even during 1990s. The competition for political space has become very vital in India, and Congress losing its base among Dalits. So Congress slowly started losing base for 1990s. This is what I discussed as second democratic upsurge of Yogendra Yadav, Dalits coming out of Indian National Congress and forming themselves as a political entity. The moment Congress realized that they are losing their identity or they are losing their support from everyone, Congress started to appease everyone. So the appeasement policies of Congress is the first thing which is which has made the communal politics more vigorous in India. So Congress started its double appeasement. On one side, they are appeasing the Dalits, and the other side, they were appeasing the Muslims. As a result, traditional Indian conservatives they started fearing about Congress and they started challenging Congress fiercely. So this made BJP very insecure because the moment you go for appeasement policies, you are trying to attract Dalits into your domain. But BJP, if they have to have power, then definitely they should have the Dalit vote bank also. So it gave rise to Mandir issue, the issue of Mandir. And VP Singh government at that point of time during 1990s, VP Singh government was present. He was unable to manage the coalition. It was a coalition. The era between 1987 to 1997. If you clearly observe, this is the era of coalition politics in India. At the center, coalition government was formed during this decade, but VP Singh government couldn't manage this coalition. He was not able to manage the militancy in Punjab, which was happened, Kashmir, and deteriorating economic conditions. So he wanted to consolidate his political position. As a result, he used the Mandal card. What is this Mandal card? It regularized OBCs and it divided the Indian society again based on caste lines. So this is another communal award to divide India. So within Hindu system, he has deepened the divide based on Dalits, based on OBCs and upper caste. So this can be clearly considered as second communal award in India. And VP Singh, for his personal gains, he has made this. So this shows that the political interests of the Congress also were equally responsible for communal politics in India. After this, BJP became more insecure because everything under Mandal Cart Congress is gaining their power. So BJP is became more insecure. The moment they became more secure, they have to go for another option. So the other option that they did is Ratha Yatra. By 1990s, they realized that if you want to have political power and if you want to control Congress, then the only available option is Ratha Yatra. So this Ratha Yatra culminated in the demolition of Babri Masjid. And this is not just the demolition of Babri Masjid, it can be said as the demolition of the optical illusion that India is a secular state. So this was the biggest blow in, or it can be clearly said as the blot in Indian independent history, that the country which was claimed to be the most secular country of the world was just in optical illusion that it is a secular country. The demolition of Babri Masjid has proven that this is just an optical illusion of Indians that we are a secular state. Yes, really, this is one blot on independent Indian times. Though there were personal interest of every party here, the interest of Congress the appeasement policies of the Congress, the role played by Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, the role played by VP Singh government, the role played by BJP equally are also responsible for these communal politics. But the appeasement policy more or less was in the inherent design of Congress. As a result, Congress started playing communal politics, and this has given antagonism to BJP. So this is what in post independent era the things has taken place. Though it is seen as an ideological agenda of BJP, they lack the political will, and Congress government led by Narasimha Rao at the center have further questioned the Congress commitment to secularism. Now, when the Babri Masjid was getting demolished, PV Narasimha Rao was very silent. Though he was from Congress, he had been at the helm of it during this period of time. He was very silent, and he just stood as an bystander. As a result, this has again questioned the communal policies, or again questioned the commitment of Congress to secularism. So this is that Congress more or less was never abdicted, was more or less never abided by their constitutional oaths as far as secular policies is concerned. Rather, they have the new generation of Congress systems, particularly after Indira Gandhi, they have chosenly started appeasement policies. After the demolition of Babri Masjid, there was Mumbai riots. These Mumbai riots turned out to be Godhra riots. Godhra riots gave rise to Gujarat riots and Muzaffarnagar riots. And slowly, by 2021, we had the so-called CAA protests, and then there was anti-Hindu Muslims protest in Delhi also. So this is how communal politics in India evolved over a period of time. Thus, the communal riots, which were seen earlier as an urban phenomena, now reached to the rural politics also. It is interpreted as a phenomenon of class politics earlier, became rural politics now. So it is no more confined to urban domain. Communal politics, they started playing a very crucial role in the rural domain also. This is one thing that we have to worry, that even the rural India is based, or rural politics in India are based on communal lines these days. Thus, it is very unfortunate that communal politics gave rise to communal violences in the country. So if you look at the violences that we have seen so far, they are based on this communal politics. So in order to understand how communal riots has played a crucial role in India, there is one man called Mr. Paul Bros. He has written a book known as Production of Hindu-Muslim Violence in a Contemporary India. So he has clearly and exclusively studied the post-independent riots that has taken place in Aligarh. So in his book, and by studying this, he has written in his book that is called Production of Hindu-Muslim Violence in Contemporary India. He clearly says that communal riots in India are not spontaneous movements, but they were clearly organized. They were politically produced by certain interested communities for their personal benefit, or for their political benefit. So he said that communal riots are not spontaneous in India. Many think that okay, people go and they enter into war between one religion goes into war with other religion, but this is not the actual thing which is in reality. He clearly studied and clearly says that these are not riots, they are programs, which means they were clearly organized. They are executed in the most professional manner, and they have proper division of labor. So it clearly says that okay, rights are not spontaneous, they are not at all rights, they were programs which was designed by certain political parties for their political gains in the most professional manner, and a clear division of labor is seen. Paul Bross said that these rights are not spontaneous rights, but they were dramatic productions. Like as we produce cinema, they produce these communal rights with the numerous rehearsals by various players with the defined roles and division of labor. So he clearly says that before entering into the action stage, they will be conducting rehearsals, and the moment they enter into the action, they make sure that these rites appear as spontaneous rites, but they were dramatic productions. Large scale Hindu Muslim rites are primarily organized political productions. So he clearly understands that it is the political class which has developed these communal riots in the country, and they developed it knowingly for their personal benefits. Just like the British did, these political parties after independence they started using the social fault lines for their political benefits. So he clearly says that there are three stages of evolution of riots in India, communal riots in India. That is preparatory stage, precipitation stage, explanation stage. In the preparatory stage, there is a role of fire tenders, which means there will be some public speakers who will be keeping the atmosphere very, very warm with their speeches. So they vitalize the atmosphere, which is very peace, with their fire speeches. As a result, they act as rehearsals. Every day they go into the society and they go on giving lectures or firing the atmosphere. This ensured that communalism never go out of environment. Even during the peaceful times, they started arguing in a very hatred manner. As a result, they ensured that communal politics are not going to be disappeared from the atmosphere. So this is the first stage. That is, they prepare the stage through their rehearsals. The moment it is precipitation stage, that is, this is the stage where communal violence actually erupts. So from preparatory stage, they enter into precipitation stage where communal violence actually erupts. And in this stage, there is a role of conversion specialist. Who are these conversion specialists? They clearly convert the atmosphere, which is very warm, into real war. This is done by the conversion specialist who are very able to make these warm conditions into war and project this as a spontaneous wars, and rather uh, they will be very successful in ensuring that okay, this war or this violence has erupted spontaneously. So conversion specialists are certain people who are very well advanced in this explanatory stage. After this precipitation stage has happened, the last stage is explanatory stage, where a blame game starts. One political party blames the other political party. So this is how political parties intendedly or intentiously involve communal politics or communal rights in India. Then again, after this precipitation, preparation starts again. So this is like a vicious cycle where politicians are always engaged in communal politics. First they go for preparation stage, then they actually implement in the form of precipitation stage, and then there will be explanatory stage, and after this then again preparation stage. This is called the vicious cycle of communal rights in India as per Paul Gross. And clearly Paul Gross has given a very real reality of Indian politics, and particularly of that of the Indian political masters. So far in this class, what I have discussed about the role of religion, how Indian religion has been evolved over a period of time, how secularism has evolved over a period of time, how secularism was different of India with that of the Western secularism, and then I have discussed how what are the causes for the role of religion in Indian politics. Slowly, I moved on to uh, the debate between the Indian scholars and the Western scholars. Western scholars said that communalism is Indian phenomena, but Indian scholars they criticized that it is not Indian phenomena. Rather, it is intentiously designed by the British. We have seen from independence how the things evolved over a period of time. By 1960s, though the state was quite peaceful community, but even after 1960s, with the demise of Congress system, slowly competition in politics started arising. The moment politics competition arises, then everything becomes fair in war, politics, and love, as it is famously said, right? So they started using these cleavages for the personal benefits. So this is what the thing is. In my next class, I will be discussing about how far religion has played a crucial role in Indian politics, and I will also see what is the latest trend in Indian politics. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. Have a good day.